Imagine a medical condition. It's super common, affects millions, but most people kind of live with it quietly, maybe don't even have a proper diagnosis. And then, bam, almost overnight, it's suddenly everywhere. Not because of some new cure, but because, well, a very high-profile person's health puts it right in the spotlight, made it a global talking point. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into chronic venous insufficiency, or CVI. It hits so many people, but honestly, it stays pretty under the radar until, like we said, that recent big diagnosis sent millions scrambling online, searching for answers. So our mission today is to sift through all that noise. We've got a stack of sources you sent over, including a recent report looking at CVI's public health side, even geopolitical ripples, all sparked by that one diagnosis. We're going to break down what CVI actually is, how it impacts people's lives, and this is fascinating, how one person's health news can ripple out into national policy, even international relations. Basically, you're getting the fast track to being really well informed. And here's where it gets really interesting. We'll explore how a leader's personal health can kind of unexpectedly become this huge public health teaching moment, and even shift how the world sees a whole country's stability. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. At its core, how do our sources define CVI?
Well, simply put, chronic venous insufficiency means your leg veins just aren't doing their job efficiently. They can't get the blood back up to your heart properly. You can kind of think of your leg veins like a series of one-way elevators, right, designed to push blood up against gravity.
The elevator analogy. That was everywhere when this news broke, wasn't it? A key way it was explained.
Absolutely. It's a great way to grasp a complex process. See, with CVI, those little one-way valves inside the veins, they get damaged or weak. They don't close all the way. So blood starts flowing backward. That's called reflux, and it pools in your lower legs and ankles.
Pooling, okay.
And that pooling dramatically ramps up the pressure inside those veins. It could affect any part of the system, too.
Yeah.
The deep veins, the superficial ones near the skin, even the little perforating veins connecting them. If the valves fail, you've got a problem.
And what does that feel like for someone, that pooling blood? What are the typical symptoms our sources mention?
Well, it varies, but there's a pretty consistent range. You might get swelling, what doctors call edema, especially in the lower legs and ankles. Lots of people report aching, cramping, throbbing, sometimes just a general feeling of heaviness or fatigue in their legs. Oh, and itching and tingling are pretty common, too.
And are there things you can actually see, like on the surface?
Yeah, definitely. Visibly, you often see varicose veins, those twisted, bulging, bluish veins into the skin. Skin changes are also really key. Sometimes it's called venous eczema or stasis dermatitis.
Huh?
Basically, the skin gets red, itchy, scaly because the circulation is poor down there.
Stasis dermatitis, right.
And it can get worse, progressing to skin that's discolored, flaky, maybe even feels kind of leathery. And the pain. It typically gets worse if you stand for a long time, but feels better if you put your legs up.
So these valves are failing. Is it something you're born with, or does it mostly develop later? What are the underlying causes?
Good question. The sources sort of put them into three buckets. Some people are born with issues, congenital problems with their vein structures. Then their primary causes, that's more about age-related changes, the veins just weakening over time. And then secondary causes often come from something else, like having had a deep vein thrombosis, a DVT. Those blood clots can really damage the valves.
Okay, DVT damage. Got it.
And beyond those direct causes, there's a big list of risk factors. Getting older, especially over 50 or even 70. Obesity is a big one. Smoking.
Lifestyle factors.
Huge lifestyle factors. Being sedentary, not moving much. Pregnancy, especially having multiple pregnancies, puts pressure on the veins. Genetics plays a role, too, if it runs in your family. Past leg injuries, surgeries, having had a DVT before. Even your job, if you stand or sit all day without moving much. And things like high blood pressure and heart failure also bump up the risk.
It's quite a list.
It is. But what really jumps out is that CVI isn't just an inevitable part of getting old. So many of those risk factors are things people could potentially change, lifestyle things.
Right. That points to big public health opportunities, doesn't it, if people are aware?
Exactly. Especially when something brings it into the public eye like this.
So if it's not just inevitable aging and there are prevention angles, how do doctors actually pin down a diagnosis? And just how common is it? The numbers sounded pretty big.
Diagnosis usually starts with a physical exam.
Yeah.
The doctor looks for those telltale signs, the swelling, skin changes, varicose veins. Then imaging helps confirm it. A duplex ultrasound is really common. It can actually show the blood flowing backward or find blockages.
Okay.
The prevalence, the numbers are staggering. Our sources mentioned over 11 million men and 22 million women, just between 40 and 80, in the U.S. affected by varicose veins alone. and more than 2 million have advanced CVI. Just think, in 2022, CVI was involved in nearly 250,000 hospital diagnoses in the U.S.
Wow. 250,000, something many people haven't even heard of.
That's the paradox right there.
Yeah, the sources really hammered that point home. So common yet.
Yet it's frequently under-recognized and undertreated. It points to a real systemic challenge in public health. Maybe gaps in awareness, screening, maybe even resources. But this is where that high-profile diagnosis comes back in. It acts like this accidental but really powerful public health campaign. It shoves this overlooked condition right into the conversation. And that can be a game changer, pushing more people to get checked out, maybe prompting health systems to rethink their approach.
So if you are diagnosed, what's the plan? What do the sources say about treatment?
Well, the main focus is usually conservative measures, stuff aimed at improving blood flow and making you feel better. Compression therapy is huge, like those special tight stockings or bandages, sometimes even pneumatic pumps that squeeze the legs.
Right, the compression socks.
Exactly. Elevating your legs regularly, ideally above heart level, is also key. Helps gravity drain the blood back. Exercise is important too. Things like walking, cycling, helps the calf muscles pump the blood upward.
And lifestyle changes. Absolutely crucial. Maintaining a healthy weight, trying not to sit or stand still for too long, not crossing your legs, wearing loose clothes, low-heeled shoes. Even a low-salt diet can help reduce swelling. Sometimes medications are needed, maybe topical steroids for skin issues, or antibiotics if there's infection, maybe anti-clotting meds.
And surgery.
It's actually pretty rare. Our sources say fewer than 10% of patients end up needing surgical intervention. Most manage well with the conservative stuff.
Okay. Now, you said CVI itself isn't usually considered life-threatening, but it can get worse and cause other problems?
Right. That's right. While it's generally not, immediately deadly, it can seriously mess with your quality of life. It can be painful, disabling if it's not managed well. The skin changes we talked about, they can worsen. More discoloration, that leathery texture, skin getting irritated, cracking, even weeping fluid.
Yeah.
And a really tough complication is developing venous stasis ulcers. These are open sores, usually down near the ankles. They are notoriously hard to heal and can easily get infected, leading to things like cellulitis, which is a skin infection.
That sounds rough.
It is. But here's a connection that often gets missed, and our sources really highlight it. There's a strong, significant link between CVI and a higher risk for cardiovascular disease, heart disease, stroke, and even overall mortality.
Really? Independent of other risk factors?
Yeah, independent of age, sex, or even known cardiovascular risks. It's a separate risk factor. In 2022, CVI was listed as the main cause of death for 62 people in the U.S. and mentioned in almost 1,000 death certificates.
Wow. So it's way more than just sore legs.
Exactly. It can be a red flag for deeper systemic health problems like DVT, heart disease, maybe diabetes. It really should prompt doctors to do a full cardiovascular risk assessment.
Okay, that makes the connection much clearer. And it brings us right back to that huge spike in Google searches. Why did millions suddenly type CVI into their search bars? What lit that fire?
Well, the material we looked at is pretty clear on this. When someone really prominent, especially a major world leader like a U.S. president, gets diagnosed with anything, it just triggers this massive wave of public interest.
People are curious. Totally. It's curiosity, maybe empathy, just a basic human desire to understand what's affecting someone they recognize.
So it takes a routine medical thing and blows it up.
Pretty much. It acts like this massive amplifier for health information. What would normally be a dry medical announcement becomes this unintentional but super effective public health campaign.
Reaches way more people.
Way more than standard health advice ever could. For public health groups, it's this golden organic opportunity to get info out there about conditions that usually fly under the radar. Could lead to more people getting diagnosed earlier, managing it better.
And we saw exactly that happen when the White House announced President Donald Trump's CVI diagnosis, didn't we? After he apparently noticed some mild swelling and had tests. What was the immediate reaction from the health community?
Yeah, the reaction was swift. Recognizing that public interest would spike, major players like the American Heart Association jumped right in. They put out information about CVI, specifically highlighting that link we just talked about, the connection to cardiovascular risk, disease, and mortality.
Seizing the moment.
Exactly. They saw it as a crucial, teachable moment for public health, leveraging the news cycle to educate.
It really was a teachable moment. So diving into the specifics of President Trump's case, what clinical details did the White House share? And maybe just as important, how did they frame it? The communication strategy seemed key.
It really did. They were surprisingly proactive and detailed. After the exam for the mild leg swelling, they formally announced the CVI diagnosis. But what stood out was how specific they were in ruling other things out, explicitly stating no evidence of deep vein thrombosis, DVT, or arterial disease.
Okay, so managing potential worries there.
Precisely. And they added that all his lab results were within normal limits. His ECG showed no signs of heart failure, renal impairment, or systemic illness. They were painting a picture of overall good health, aside from this specific issue.
And the framing of CVI itself.
Very deliberate. They characterized it as a common condition, particularly in individuals over the age of 70. And crucially, they labeled it not considered life-threatening.
Normalizing it, downplaying alarm.
Absolutely. Normalize it, minimize alarm. They even got ahead of potential questions about visible bruising on his hands, attributing it to minor soft tissue irritation from frequent handshaking and the use of aspirin.
Interesting, they addressed that too.
Yeah, it suggests a very conscious strategy. From their perspective, this detailed, proactive communication was about controlling the narrative, shutting down speculation, and projecting that image of health and stability, vital for a leader under constant scrutiny.
It really sets a benchmark, maybe, for how transparency and narrative control might work in the future for leaders' health disclosures.
It certainly could. And it helps that, the core diagnosis, CVI, at age 79 with mild swelling, fits right into the typical picture. It helps make it seem like a normal part of aging for many.
Okay, now let's shift to the personal side for a head of state. Our sources are clear. CVI symptoms, the pain, itching, heaviness, cramping, swelling, they can really drag down your quality of life. Make everyday stuff feel like a chore, lead to diminished quality of life, and loss of work productivity.
Which immediately raises a big question, right? How do those symptoms square with the life of a president? Insane schedule, constant travel, hours on their feet for appearances, shaking countless hands.
Yeah, prolonged standing must be agony.
Could be, yeah. And this is where that discrepancy we noted becomes really interesting. The White House saying not experiencing discomfort, not life-threatening, versus the medical literature saying CVI can significantly impact your quality of life, be painful and disabling, lead to loss of work productivity.
That's a pretty stark contrast. Why do you think that gap exists? Is it purely about projecting strength?
I think projecting strength is a huge part of it, absolutely. But it underscores this fundamental tension in presidential health disclosures. You have to balance transparency, or the appearance of it, with this absolute political necessity to seem vigorous and capable. Even something considered benign could cumulatively chip away at stamina, focus, and that all-important public image of fitness for office.
Yeah, I'm just picturing trying to follow the CVI management advice in that job. Elevate your legs above heart level during a G7 summit. Go for a brisk walk during a crisis meeting.
Exactly. It highlights the physical toll, even from seemingly minor conditions. So how do you manage CVI in that pressure cooker?
Given those standard recommendations we talked about.
Right. The reality check is sticking to those crucial things, wearing compression constantly, elevated legs frequently, regular exercise, weight management, avoiding long periods of standing or sitting. It's incredibly difficult for a president. The job description is almost the opposite of what's recommended. Constant travel, formal events, unpredictable crises. They all clash with needing rest, elevation, or scheduled activity. And the White House didn't really elaborate on his specific management plan, which kind of reinforces how tricky it must be.
And historically, this idea of perceived versus actual health in presidents, there's a long history of secrecy there.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned JFK, FDR, Woodrow Wilson all had serious health issues, largely concealed from the public to maintain that image of strength. It was seen as politically essential.
So even a relatively benign disclosure like CVI, especially maybe before an election, it just fuels speculation about fitness for office.
Inevitably, we saw that with Trump's CVI. The White House explicitly said they disclosed it to dispel recent speculation. That tells you everything. It highlights that core conflict,
Right.
leaders' right to medical privacy versus the public's perceived right or need to know about the health of someone holding immense power. It's a real tightrope.
Okay, let's zoom out again to the national picture. Public health, policy, political talk. You mentioned the public seems to want more transparency now compared to the days of FDR or JFK. What does that mean going forward?
It suggests that presidential health is becoming even more tied to public trust and how people perceive national stability. Trump's disclosure, even if strategically managed, reflects this shift in an age of instant information. Future administrations might find that withholding health info, even seemingly small stuff, could backfire badly, eroding public confidence. Every sniffle can get politicized.
But on the flip side, it created this huge opportunity for public health education on CVI. How can organizations really capitalize on moments like this?
It really was a golden teachable moment. A chance for public health bodies to flood the zone with good information about CVI symptoms, risks, why early detection matters. When millions are already searching for info, you can potentially change health behaviors on a mass scale. Get people talking to their doctors, maybe catch things earlier, improve outcomes for a condition that often just gets worse without management. It's like a massive free PSA.
Looking back at those historical examples you gave, it's just so clear that presidential health is never just about medicine.
Never. It's inherently political. Think about FDR hiding his paralysis to project strength during the Depression and war. Wilson's strokes, and his wife basically running things in secret. JFK's Addison's disease and pain meds kept quiet. Even his tan was likely steroid-induced hyperpigmentation.
Right, and Chester Arthur hiding Bright's disease, affecting his re-election decision, then Teddy Roosevelt giving a speech after being shot, ultimate resilience projection.
Exactly. And then fast forward to Trump, his COVID diagnosis was very public, and this CVI disclosure was framed very carefully to counter speculation and emphasize the benign nature.
So illness can be spun as vulnerability or as proof of toughness.
Precisely. The narrative around the health is as important as the health itself. It shapes trust, perceived ability, and election results. Every detail gets weighed politically.
And this focus on CBI also touches on bigger health policy issues, right? Chronic diseases are a massive challenge in the U.S. You mentioned initiatives like the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission, tackling obesity, diabetes, known risk factors for CBI.
Yeah, and if you want to connect it even further, think about national readiness. Those stats are stark. 77% of young adults unfit for military service due to health reasons. And 90% of the U.S.'s $4.5 trillion annual healthcare spend goes to chronic and mental health conditions.
Wow, 90%. That's unbelievable.
It's huge. So while a single CVI diagnosis doesn't directly change policy, the attention it brings could absolutely push chronic disease prevention and management higher up the national conversation, maybe influencing policy discussions down the line.
Okay, finally, let's look outward, the international angle. A world leader's health isn't just a domestic issue. It can ripple through international relations, right? Affecting decisions, negotiations.
Absolutely. What really comes through in the sources is this idea of geopolitical vulnerability. If a leader's health is concealed or perceived to be declining, it can lead to misjudgments by other nations, maybe perceived weakness that could be exploited. Foreign governments, intelligence agencies, you can bet they scrutinize every health disclosure, looking for hints of deeper issues that might affect a leader's judgment or staying power. It feeds into their strategic calculations.
So even with something like CVI, which doesn't affect thinking, the broader context of age and health becomes part of that international assessment.
Exactly. It's part of the overall picture they analyze.
And global health security itself, pandemics, disease outbreaks, that's become a core part of foreign policy now.
Increasingly so, yes. Countries recognize that health risks don't respect borders. They impact travel, trade, everything. So strong health diplomacy needs strong leadership. And it's complex terrain. Look at the Trump administration. They had global health initiatives, like for COVID, but also pulled the U.S. out of the WHO. Shows how tangled health and foreign policy can get.
And ultimately, how the world sees the U.S. president's health affects perceptions of America itself. Stability, strength.
Definitely. The U.S. president's health is a global symbol in many ways of American stability and leadership capacity. So even a non-critical illness like CVI, when it's announced, gets dissected by allies and adversaries alike. It can subtly shift confidence, influence strategic thinking. Which brings us back to why the White House was likely so detailed and proactive in their CVI announcement. It wasn't just for the domestic audience. It was also a strategic move to project stability on the world stage.
Right, managing those international perceptions. So wrapping up our deep dive today, it's pretty amazing how chronic venous insufficiency, this really common but often ignored condition, got catapulted into the spotlight. And looking closely at that moment reveals so much about how we talk about health publicly, the incredible pressures of high office, our changing expectations around transparency, and this really complex web connecting one person's health to national stability and even global dynamics.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This whole exploration of CDI, triggered by one public disclosure, it illuminates how tangled personal health, public information, and these huge global forces really are.
It absolutely does. And that leads to a final thought for you, our listener. What does this episode teach us about the future, about health transparency for leaders, and maybe how can we better use these kinds of teachable moments for public good in our super connected world.
Yeah, and our sources hinted at some potential answers, didn't they? Thinking about how health agencies can leverage these moments, the power of lifestyle changes for chronic disease, making sure doctors are more aware, maybe standardizing how presidential health is disclosed, integrating health diplomacy more deeply.
Definitely a lot to mull over, lots to think about.